5 years ago, the world's most powerful government issued what should have been a death sentence to certain company. In 2019, the United States added Huawei to a trade blacklist. For most companies, this would have been the end. You lose access to Google services, you lose access to the chips that make your phones work, you lose your seat at the global table. The headlines back then were clear. Huawei is finished. But if you look at the data for 2026, something strange has happened. Huawei didn't just survive, they grew. In 2025, their revenue climbed back toward $123 billion. That is almost back to their all-time record. Today, we are performing a forensic audit of how they did it. We are going to look at the secret chips, the hidden support networks, and most importantly, the massive business pivot that turned a phone company into a national infrastructure giant. Let's start with the moment the world realized the ban had failed. It happened quietly in late 2023 with the launch of a phone called the Mate 60 Pro. For years, the US had blocked Huawei from buying 5G chips. The logic was simple. If Huawei can't buy the chips, they can't make 5G phones. But when people took this new phone apart, they found a 7-nanometer chip called the Kirin 9000S. This chip was made entirely inside China. The forensic mystery here is how they did it. To make chips this advanced, you usually need a specific machine from a company in the Netherlands called ASML. China was banned from buying those machines. But Huawei worked with a Chinese chipmaker called SMIC to perform a technical heist. They took older machines and pushed them to their absolute physical limits. It wasn't efficient and it was expensive, but it worked. They proved that they could build a high-end brain for a smartphone without a single piece of American technology. But a chip is just a piece of silicon. To truly survive, Huawei had to perform a total organ transplant on their products. They went through every single device they made and found 13,000 parts that came from the US or its allies. One by one, they replaced them. They redesigned 4,000 circuit boards. They stopped being a customer of the world and started being the architect of their own supply chain. However, the phone business is only a small part of why Huawei is still standing. This brings us to the core of our audit, the massive business pivot. Huawei realized that as long as they relied on selling consumer gadgets, they were vulnerable to sanctions, so they decided to become the digital foundation for the rest of the world. If you go to a coal mine in China today, you won't see just miners, you will see Huawei technology. They created a division specifically for smart mining. They used their 5G expertise to connect thousands of sensors and autonomous vehicles deep underground. They did the same for shipping ports. These are businesses that don't care about the Google Play Store. They care about efficiency and safety. By moving into heavy industry, Huawei created a revenue stream that the US government has almost no way to touch. Then there's the smart car gamble. Huawei saw the shift toward electric vehicles and made a brilliant business move. Instead of spending billions to build their own cars, they decided to become the brain for everyone else. They created a software system called the Advanced Driving System. They partnered with dozens of Chinese car companies. When you buy a high-end electric car in China today, there's a good chance it is powered by Huawei. They are positioning themselves to be the Microsoft of the auto world. If they succeed, they will control the software in millions of vehicles, creating a massive, stable business that is insulated from trade bans.
But a business is only as strong as its software. This is where HarmonyOS comes in. When Huawei lost access to Android, everyone thought their phones were useless. But Huawei spent billions to build HarmonyOS from the ground up. By 2026, they have moved past just copying Android. Their new HarmonyOS Next is a completely independent system. They've convinced thousands of developers to build apps specifically for them. They created a third ecosystem to rival Apple and Google. By owning the software, they own the relationship with the customer. They are no longer just a hardware company, they are a platform. Now, we have to look at the third layer of this survival, the shadow support. A company doesn't lose $100 billion in revenue and survive on its own. The forensic data shows that Huawei had massive help. When they were forced to sell their Honor phone brand to save it from sanctions, the buyers were a consortium led by the Chinese government. This was a strategic move to keep the brand alive while Huawei focused on higher-end technology. There are also reports of a shadow fab network. This is a series of secret or semi-secret chip factories funded by the state but operated with Huawei's expertise. It's a way to hide the supply chain so the US can't see who is making what. Huawei effectively became a national champion. The Chinese government saw Huawei's survival as a matter of national pride and security. They received massive R&D grants and became the primary provider for government technology contracts. But even with all that help, the math is staggering. Huawei spends over $20 billion a year on research and development. That is one of the highest R&D budgets in the world. They didn't just survive by hiding, they survived by out-engineering the problem. They hired the best talent and gave them a simple mission: find a way around every single ban. As we look at the results in 2026, the Huawei experiment has given the world a new blueprint for how a company can survive a superpower conflict. They diversified. They went from selling phones to teenagers to selling AI infrastructure to governments. They went from using American chips to building their own shadow factories. They went from using Google software to creating a national operating system. The result is a company that is more dangerous to its competitors now than it was before the ban. By trying to crush Huawei, the US actually forced them to become self-sufficient. They removed Huawei's addiction to Western technology. Today, Huawei is a leaner, more aggressive, and more independent giant. The lesson for the global economy is clear. Sanctions can hurt a company, but if that company has enough talent and enough government backing, it can evolve. Huawei is no longer just a telecommunications company. It's a symbol of a new era of sovereign technology. They proved that if you close the front door, they will build a new house with a secret back door. So, when we look at the final numbers of this audit, we see a company that has successfully de-Americanized itself. They have stable revenue from mining, cars, and cloud computing. They have a growing smartphone business powered by domestic chips. And they have a software ecosystem that is now a permanent part of the global landscape. Huawei's story isn't just about a phone company. It's about the end of the unipolar tech world. It's about the birth of a parallel system that doesn't need the US to function. Whether you agree with their methods or not, the forensic facts don't lie. Huawei is still here, and they are stronger than anyone predicted.
But the true legacy of the Huawei experiment isn't just about one company's survival. It's about the blueprint they've left for the rest of the world. By 2026, we are seeing the rise of what experts call bifurcated technology. We're moving away from a single global internet and toward two distinct digital hemispheres, one centered in Silicon Valley and the other an increasingly self-sufficient ecosystem built on the lessons Huawei learned the hard way.